HIPAA and high-tech laws are federal regulations about which we must all be knowledgeable. We're going to cover here how these regulations impact MDA, what we must do to stay compliant, and protect personal information about individuals and families that we serve. And we will review the implications of not following MDA's privacy and security procedures related to HIPAA and high-tech laws. We will identify how federal, HIPAA, and high-tech regulations and state medical privacy laws apply to MDA's business and must be adhered to by all MDA staff and volunteers. We will demonstrate how you can and must keep all protected health information, PHI, secure, whether in written, verbal, or electronic communications. We will also recognize the implications of not protecting PHI. And finally, we will learn what must be done in the event there is a suspected or confirmed breach of PHI. HIPAA is a federal law that requires covered entities, like MDA, to protect the privacy of patient information, whether on paper, in conversation, or in electronic format, and to keep patient health information secure. We must also observe state laws regarding the protection of medical information about the families that we serve. MDA has always been committed to keeping important health information confidential, even before it was a federal law, because quite simply, it's the right thing to do. Now, however, it's also the law. So it's critical that we all understand the laws and the repercussions of not following them. What can happen if we don't fulfill our obligations under HIPAA? We would fail on our commitment to the families we serve and could face major fines and penalties as an organization and possibly even as individuals based on HIPAA enforcement rules. Not fulfilling our HIPAA obligations can also impact our partnership with institutions that host MDA care centers. These institutions are covered entities under HIPAA, and they expect MDA to safeguard PHI they provide to us about individuals who receive medical care through the MDA Care Center program. MDA as an organization would certainly suffer from the reputational damage that can be caused when having to notify individuals we serve, care centers, and in some cases even the Department of Health and Human Services if a breach occurs. MDA could be faced with monetary penalties which would divert previous funds from our mission programs. And you personally could face some pretty hefty fines and penalties for a breach of confidentiality. Everyone at MDA is responsible for the security of protected health information, PHI. And this includes all verbal, written, and electronic communications that contain individual health identifiers. We'll talk about those in a minute. While keeping PHI confidential is the law, it's also, quite simply, the right thing to do. Think about your own personal information or that of someone you care about. How would you want it to be safe and secure? Respect that for others and do everything you can to keep confidential information confidential. If you have any questions or concerns at any time about HIPAA and MDA's associated policies or procedures, please talk to your MDA leadership or reach out to MDA's privacy or security officer. Of course, MDA's ability to fulfill our mission requires the support of volunteers and offices across the country. Does this mean volunteers must follow MDA's HIPAA policies and procedures too? You bet, and each one of us has a role in making sure this happens. All volunteers that will have access to PHI must go through HIPAA training and sign the Health, Privacy, and Security Policy, which will then be kept on file and will need to be renewed every 12 months. Not only is this to ensure that we stay within the federal guidelines, but it also helps everyone at MDA do the best we can for our families. So now that we've established the importance of everyone at MDA protecting personal health information, let's talk a little bit more about what this means. PHI is information that is related to an individual's past, present, or future physical or health condition. The information includes at least one of over a dozen individual identifiers, IIHI, that we'll talk about in a minute. And the information is in written, verbal, or electronic format, which also includes photographs and social media posts. Every individual's PHI must be protected, and those protections remain in place even after death. So let's take a look at these individual health identifiers. You don't have to memorize this list immediately since it's posted on Merlin, but take a look at it. You'll notice right away that it includes a lot of pieces of information that we may receive, store, and share, perhaps without realizing that such information is protected by HIPAA. A person's name, address, certain dates, like their birthdays, telephone numbers, email addresses, and certainly social security numbers must all be kept confidential. There are some that might not be quite as obvious. Things like URLs, IP addresses, and photographs in which individuals can be identified. So really, let's think about how all of this applies to life at MDA. We handle a lot of information regarding the families that we serve, and we have a responsibility to protect it in all verbal, written, and electronic communications. Remember, PHI can exist in verbal, print, or electronic format. So always be aware of your surroundings when discussing individuals that we serve. Certainly, don't leave protected health information on answering machines or message services. And when you are making presentations or sharing stories, don't use identifiable information without express written permission. Here are the steps you need to take if you have information on paper that could be considered PHI. Do not leave printed papers that contain PHI in copiers, printers, or fax machines. Make sure you do not leave PHI sitting on your desk. Shred all paper with PHI before throwing it away, and do not leave unattended papers in your car. If you are going to be communicating with MDA families via regular mail, perhaps sending out invitations to a disease-specific meeting, do not send postcards with open and visible information. It must be in a sealed envelope. And finally, make sure that all information in newsletters and print materials, including photos, is screened and that we have specific, written permission if we want to include any information that could be considered PHI. If in doubt, seek guidance from your immediate supervisor, your division's Director of Family Support and Clinical Care, or MDA's privacy officer. Many people miss protecting PHI when it comes to electronic communications, but there are many things we must be aware of. You will need to encrypt any email that contains PHI. There is training on the MDA Learning Center that addresses how to encrypt an email. It is super easy. Make sure you check all of the names in the To and CC fields to make sure that the recipients are limited to those who you really need to see that email. Don't forget to use the blind copy option if you are sending the same email to multiple people served by MDA to help keep their email information secure. Same thing with the fax. Make sure that the fax number you are sending to is correct. Do not store unencrypted PHI on mobile storage devices like flash drives. If you need to keep a copy of something, make sure that it is encrypted and secure. Remember that you are responsible for what happens on your computer under your login credentials. Lock or turn off your computer when it is not in use, and do not share your password with anyone. If you are on the road, make sure that your laptop is secured. Even in the trunk is better than being visible out in your car, but it's always best to take it with you. And always remember that HIPAA applies to social media as well. So let's take a look at how to navigate social media platforms while keeping PHI secure. For the purposes of this training, social media pertains to today's most popular social media platforms, such as Facebook and Twitter, and any new social media tools that emerge in the future. It can be so easy to drop a name on Facebook or attach one of your favorite MDA photos to a Twitter post, but we can't always do that when we're committed to fulfilling our obligations under HIPAA. So before posting anything about those we serve and their families, we need to consider a few rules for protecting PHI in social media. Rule number 1, don't share, post, discuss, or otherwise disseminate any information, including images such as photos or videos about those we serve without having written permission on file. This may be the form of MDA's consent or consent for use a likeness form, an MDA can't application with all sections signed, or MDA's authorization to disclose protected health information form indicating the precise nature in which personal information can be used. It's essential that you get written permission before posting content about individuals served by MDA, and upload a copy of the consent to the individual's Salesforce contact record. Rule number 2. Posts, shares, images, and information about MDA individuals and families should be kept general in nature. Ideally, photos and videos are in group settings. Again, be sure consent forms are on file. For children, take special care to not use last names, the names of the school he or she attends, or other confidential details. Rule number 3. The same policies and procedures that apply to the use and disclosure of PHI in your day-to-day work apply equally in the world of social media. The general rule is, if you wouldn't say it in a crowded elevator, don't say it on social media. If in doubt, check with your supervisor, your division's director of family support and clinical care, or MDA's privacy officer before posting. It's better to take the extra time to ensure our social media posts are appropriate than it is to be faced with a HIPAA breach. We have covered a lot as it relates to what not to do. Now let's take a look at when it is okay to share PHI. We can disclose PHI to MDA staff for the purpose of conducting MDA business. We can also disclose PHI to individuals specifically designated by MDA staff. For instance, if you're an MDA camp volunteer, you can disclose PHI to the camp medical team during the camp week in connection with the health or well-being of another camp participant or the safety of the camp community. Similarly, if you're volunteering in the MDA office and take a message from someone who has just received a diagnosis, you can share this with MDA staff so that appropriate follow-up can take place. In any scenario where sharing PHI is permissible, we should only be disclosing the minimum amount of information required. This means that before sharing information, ask yourself, does the person I'm talking to need to know this information in order for him or her to do their job for MDA? If in doubt, reach out to your MDA leadership team for further guidance. A HIPAA privacy breach is just what you think it is. Confidential information about one or more persons has been compromised. It can be by accident or on purpose. But if the information got out to unauthorized individuals or entities, or has the potential to be seen by unauthorized individuals or entities, then that is considered an unauthorized disclosure and possibly a breach as defined by HIPAA. Breaches can happen with verbal, written, or electronic communications. And yes, most breaches are due to human behavior. The good news is that this means we have the power to prevent most privacy breaches. Listed here are just a few ways that privacy can be breached when PHI is involved. Overheard conversations, unsecured computer equipment being lost or stolen, paper reports being left in plain sight, emails sent to the wrong person with private information in them, etc., etc. You can probably envision any of these things happening to you, but it's your job to make sure they don't. If you suspect or know for sure that a breach has happened, you need to contact your supervisor and the Family Support and Clinical Care Department immediately. The FSCC team will help investigate and determine what next steps may be required. In some situations, the MDA care centers where individuals impacted by the breach have received medical care are required by law to report the breach to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And if the breach involved PHI of more than 500 people, the care center and MDA may have to issue a public notice. It may also be necessary for MDA to notify specific individuals if their information was not kept confidential. You are not expected to make the determination about whether an actual breach has occurred. Your national office team will work with you to make that determination. So the important thing to remember is to report any suspected privacy breach as soon as it comes to your attention. In addition to being the law and being the right thing to do, complying with HIPAA and securing PHI is also smart business. It demonstrates to our care centers that we are trusted partners in the exchange of PHI, and it protects MDA's reputation as an organization that's committed to preserving the confidentiality of PHI. Here are a few quick reminders. Please read through these before closing the video.